I'll be doing the impossible. I'm going to be taking core themes of a book that is nearing completion that's been emerging for the last 20 years or more. It's called Awakening Global Enlightenment, Our Maturation as a Species. Global enlightenment, what is that? Enlightenment is elusive enough. How dare you speak about global enlightenment? But what I like to do, and really it's impossible because this has been emerging on the planet for over 3,000 years and beyond, across the planet. All of our great wisdom teachers, our great scriptures, visionaries, mystics, scientists, have all been in quest of this deep space that we know is a source of all our intelligence, the light of reason, our cultures, meaning, truth, our values. They all come out of some deep shared space. And the word global in philosophy is common around the planet right now. We hear global corporations and global communications, but global in wisdom and philosophy means the meeting of diverse worlds, cultures, worldviews. We live in different worlds. We're raised in different cultures. And a culture is a grammar of the mind. It's a code. A culture is a code that you use and you live and you are to make sense of your ecology and the space you're in. And what makes sense in one worldview often does not make sense in another. It's very challenging to cross worlds. And our education system, parenting and so forth, doesn't educate us sufficiently in understanding how do you cross worlds. If, for example, say in an American culture, which is already diverse with different worlds in the marketplace, the Judeo-Christian tradition is, if that's my background, and I'm steeped in that, and my culture speaks that language, can I enter the Chinese mind? Can I enter into the Tao, into the Qi? Can I understand Feng Shui? Can I understand acupuncture? Could I enter the Hindu world coming out of the Vedas, evolving for centuries, millennia? Samsara, karma, yoga, dharma. What's up with that? Can I really understand those fundamental world-shaping concepts and ways of life if you're in a different worldview? Can you enter African modes of thought, indigenous modes of thought? Can we enter the world of Lakota and understand how they're seeing the world? That's the global space. And most of us raised in our cultures, we're raised in a way, a framework, a language, a meme, to see and interpret the world. We create a lens, and a lens creates us. So we grow up with a lens that's shaping how we see ourselves, how we process all of our experience. And we don't understand how do we move between worlds. How do we, therefore, since a world shapes your meaning and your life and your identity and your structure and your ecology, and that's how you make sense of it, is it possible to cross into other worlds? Can I enter the Hindu mind? Can I enter the world of Buddha? Can I go back and understand Socrates? Can I enter and so forth? Can we have feminist ways of thinking? And can I enter the mind of the scientist and go into the quantum reality? That's a huge challenge. And that's been my life work for the last 50 years, trying to understand what are the transformation rules of respecting the diversity of worlds, the different ways and forms and codes that shape them within. And more so, how can we cross? Can we cross into diverse worlds? And of course, our planetary situation as a global world, and in our American culture, which is a multicultural society, it means living across multiple worlds. And if we don't know how to recognize them, don't know how to communicate across worlds, violence breaks out. And that's been classic and tragic in our human situation. The Holocaust, ethnic cleansing, the racism, sexism, homophobic reactions against others. How do you deal with the other is a big question of crossing worlds. So what I'm going to do in a very brief time is to give you a central idea of what is global enlightenment? What is enlightenment anyway? What is Buddha attempting to do at that monumental moment when he had his awakening and his enlightenment and the Four Noble Truths? What's happening in the Bhagavad Gita, this great text, which is an enlightenment? Lord Krishna comes to guide Arjuna, the battle warrior on the battlefield, in a broken family, in the moment of a war, as the Bhagavad Gita opens, and he sees he can't kill his own people. It's just not right. And he drops his weapon in despair and turns to Krishna, help me to understand, how do I deal with this? He was having a meltdown of his life at that moment, and Krishna helps him with the science of yoga to rise into the space of enlightenment, of the Atman, of the Brahman, of the space of Om. Come into the zone. What is the literacy of that? All of the Bhagavad Gita, and this is what Gandhi is living. He was living, how do you live in the Atma? That's why Mahatma Gandhi is called Mahatma, great Atma, the self. When we go across the planet, look at Socrates, who got hemlock for his wisdom. He was called the wisest of men. Why? Because he knew he didn't know. What everyone was calling wisdom and knowledge, he saw it was opinion. It wasn't real knowledge. And for that reason, the Oracle of Delphi says Socrates is the wisest of humans, because he understood it was just opinion and not real knowledge. And so Socrates is a hero of the whole European mind and philosophy and the birth of wisdom. By the way, my field is philosophia. Sophia, the infinite feminine principle of wisdom, that's wisdom. And to be a lover of wisdom, a philosophia, is my field, loving wisdom. And Socrates was a lover of wisdom. He was after the logos, the Greek word for what? For the fundamental force, the field that lights up our minds and make it real. That we need to do that to become a real self. So Socrates says, know thyself above all else. The unexamined life is not worth living. So all of European philosophy coming out of Plato, Socrates, Plato is a student of Socrates, and Aristotle, the genius, who launched first philosophy and wisdom for the European Greek mind, is a student of Plato. So Socrates is the hero, his student Plato, Aristotle, and fast forward through the centuries into where we are. Augustine, St. Thomas, Duns Scotus, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Kant, Hegel, on into the contemporary time. What's going on in the quest for wisdom? That's just one lineage, the European lineage. The Judeo-Christian tradition is another. From Abraham, being called by God, love me with all you've got. And Abraham has to struggle globally with, do I let go of my Isaac? Because if you're going to love God first and foremost with all your heart and soul, can you have your own agenda first? So Abraham was really a global moment. But it's hard to see across these quite diverse traditions. Muhammad is getting his revelations. Jesus is making a sacrifice. He says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, the logos in the flesh, and that kind of crazy talk. Is that enlightenment? What's going on there? The point then is that when we cross diverse worlds, it's even hard to recognize as a common theme and a common objective. But what I'm going to suggest, and really what the heart of my book is, global enlightenment, is if we dare to step back from our local lens of our mind, our local cultural story, and dilate ourselves into a global space, and that's the key. How do we do that? Can we enter a global space? What is that about? That's the space of global enlightenment. What happens then if you can do it? If you could step back and detach from your privileged story that you're used to and it's inbred within you and your deepest habits of mind, that's already a major accomplishment if you can do it. Cut some slack, open some space to allow diverse worlds, dance across worlds, enter their ways of thinking, enter their codes. And if you can do that, and that's the global space I'd like to illustrate in this meditation. This is not a lecture, it's a meditation. I'd like you to come on a journey into the heart of global wisdom very quickly to see that we may have been missing the heart of enlightenment and our scriptures all these millennia. Why? Because we've been lodged in a certain barrier of the mind, of our culture, of our lens, and our great teachers have been calling us, step back, step higher. The script we're using, the culture we're making, the memes we're caught in are holding us back from our full humanity. And enlightenment is medicine for life. It is powerful, transformative medicine. That's not theory. It's not theory, it's not information, it's transformation. The transformation that calls us into the highest blossoming of our human form. As if the caterpillar has to become a butterfly. And the human form, the ego-based human, is still an ego pillar. And to come into the global space with enlightenment, the medicine of enlightenment, the Atman, whatever you call it, the Christ space, the Buddha space, the Zen space, the space of the unified field, that's been missing. We've not had the code to cross as a people into that. But all the great enlightenment teachers meant for humanity, the people, we the people, to have access to that space, to our human form. So really, global enlightenment is really the democratization of enlightenment for we the people across the planet. We're born for that. What I'd like to do very briefly in the short time I have is to give you a quick sketch to visualize where the Enlightenment teachers were calling us and where we have been somehow when Socrates says humanity is in the cave and we need to leave the cave and come into the light, the journey of wisdom. So that's what I'd like to do very quickly. And so I just make a space here to suggest this is the screen of consciousness where we process all of our experience and our information. That's what this would represent. And we, whoever you are, here you are, you have a lens, and somehow the lens, I'm going to use this for the lens of the mind, shows up your culture. So if you're in the Chinese culture, you'll have a Chinese world. If you're in certain African modes of thought, you'll see the world differently. If you're using a scientific lens, an Einstein lens, you'd see a different world, a quantum world, a world of science, and so forth. So as you shift your lens, different information appears. And we're really not taught, how do we know what world we're in? And some of us may be in multiple worlds. So for example, logicians understood for centuries that the thought space, where we make our experience and ourselves and our identities, is a space where we take items of thought and join them. It's called predication. To think is to predicate. So the code of thinking, and this is logic, the science of logic is the laws of thought. When you join subject and predicate to make sense, Socrates is wise. Wilmington is in Delaware. America is a democracy. I am hungry, I am cold, I am American, I am female. All the information going on there. But when you're using one lens, you could speak one way. Suppose I'm in the biblical world. I'm speaking from the Bible. That is one code I'm living by. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. Genesis. That's a different, God rules. In the beginning is God. That's one language. But what if I'm speaking as a scientist, Big Bang? Universe started with a Big Bang. No consciousness or intelligence guiding it. Intelligence came later. It emerged in a Darwinian evolutionary form. And then we had human form coming out of that. That's a very different world. When I say I as a scientist and speak the language of the Big Bang, or I as a believing Christian or Jew or Muslim, speaking the world of the biblical world where God rules, this space is very different from that space. We enter the American space, let's say, I'm an ecumenical American. I believe keep your religion out of your politics. And let's open up the ecumenical space for a multicultural society, we say. And already that's causing me deep pain because my religious world say, breathe and live and love God in every moment. How can I exclude that from my political life? I'm having trouble. So you can live, an ordinary person can be living in multiple worlds and not know that she is being split into different identities. Sub 1, sub 2, sub 3, and so forth. So by now you're seeing a therapist to get this worked out. He says, help me, I don't know who I am, what's going on, how do I put it together? I'm literally in a schizophrenic space. It's normal schizophrenia to be broken across worlds. Your self is fragmented. And so you go to your therapist and she's Jungian and she's saying to you that you've got a male and a female and you've got to get them together and to have an integral personality. And now you're really getting scared. You mean there's a woman, a female? And I said, oy vey, I'm going crazy. And it gets worse and worse. And I go take yoga. And I'm chanting Om to try and find some peace in my life. And I have a friend who tells me, if you feng shui your room, it'll flow better. And what's going on, in fact, is that you're dancing across diverse personalities and realities. And you will then be, in a way, fragmented and not integral. That's picture number one. But yet, if you listen and step back from any of these local lenses, this is the main point I'm making, and time is almost up. The lens you're using is shaping your world. What makes sense in one world may not make sense in another. Worlds are worlds apart and often in deep battles and collisions, 9/11s, Holocaust, genocide. It's horrible what's going on in the clash of civilizations and worlds and religions and identities. How do you create a democracy with broken, fragmented worldviews where we, the people, don't know how to speak and dialogue across our worlds? But if we just stand back, and this is the big moment now, and say, listen to our great teachers of enlightenment. Look into the Chinese mind. The great text of Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching, Tao. The opening lines of this great text, the Tao that is named is not the Tao. Go into the Om. All of the Vedic tradition of yoga, millennia unfolded. Meditate on Om. Not predicate, meditate. Why? Because meditation is a technology that takes you into the deeper space and away from the predication where you object. The subject thinker has an object of thought. This is getting messy, I see. But if you just start, Yahweh, love God, the call of God to the people with all your heart, mind, and soul. And Abraham struggles, do I let go of Isaac and put God first? Big moment for humanity. It sounds horrible to let go. Isaac represents the identity, your culture, your identity that comes from being in this space. This is the space where you get your ID. And the great teachers began to see that when you get stuck in a local ID and play this game without knowing it, the script chops everything into pieces. Identity rules here. What is identity? It's a simple, powerful principle that logicians and philosophers have known for ages. A is A. Who will argue with that? A thing is what it is. I am I, you are you, and so forth. It has not been seen that the principle of identity, which rules our culture, chops and breaks and separates. And the great teachers calling us to enlightenment saw there's a deeper calculus of life, that a deeper code, a deeper language that we need to get to in order to heal the brokenness and fragmentation of this space of culture. So what you've been hearing, if you step back and look across the great Enlightenment traditions, and you find, for example, if you go into Buddha's shunyata. Shunyata is the word for emptiness from the Sanskrit. It means zeroness, zero of stuff from here. Buddha's 4 great principles and global axioms that you saw when you woke up for enlightenment, what were they? Very powerful, but they're classic. What I'm suggesting is that although at first you may not have seen it, when you enter the global space and begin to see the pattern, all of these great traditions are beginning to say there's something deep and surrounding us. It's a holistic, integral field of infinite flow and interconnectivity. And there's a script for that, and we humans have to learn it in coming out of this stage of our evolution into a more mature stage where we go into the source of interconnectivity. So to the Buddha's 4 great axioms, I have to wrap it up in a moment, is that existence is suffering. It has a cause attached to our ID. We have a choice. We could use a higher integral script. And the 4th noble truth is, and we can do so by rehabilitating every moment of our life with mindful living. That is the yoga pathway too. The pathway of Jesus, who's saying you've got to die to cross into life. This space is separated from connectivity. So the consensus, and I'll wrap it up on this note and just leave it as a visual, and it's really headline news. Any talk from here, any word, mark it with, I use single strokes to say we better know when we're here. How do I know when I cross into the enlightenment space? I use double parentheses to mark that space. What's the big deal? What's the difference? This is where you're playing I and the it. Everything you think about becomes an object, an it. But when you cross into the sacred space of enlightenment, the I and the other are intertwined profoundly. Language shifts when you cross this line. It shifts from every word has its separate identity and its own space to a place of interconnectivity and flow. That's the Buddha space, that's the Christ space, that's the yoga space. When you enter the Om space, or the Logos, to use the Greek, what do you have? Ethics, which is what? The self is encoded in the other, the I-thou. What is this? The I-it. What does that mean? If you play this game, everything is an object, an it, an entity, a being. Sounds great, but Buddha, for example, saw that's a disaster. You're not an entity, you're a person. What is a person? A dialogue, interconnected flow in the zone. So the pathway of global enlightenment, I will wrap it up now, is a movement from this space to that. And that's really the maturation of our species. From an ego pillar to a Buddha fly, to play with that. It really is nothing less than that. Thank you very much for listening.